Hope you're doing great. Jose, first up today. GM Familia Bitcoin. Thank you, Jose. Thank you. Ben, good morning, team. I can't stop thinking about Bitcoin. Nor can I. We're going to be talking about Bitcoin today. Guess what? Right? The sun is up. Saludos from Puerto Rico. I didn't know you're in Puerto Rico. Or as that's the way Trump said it, Puerto Rico. Awesome, Jose. Nice to see you, my man. Ben, we love Puerto Rico. Indeed, we love Puerto Rico. Bitcoin country. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning, Habib. Hope you're doing great. B for victory. Bomatan. Good morning, Bitcoiners. P-Man. Hello, fine folks. Indeed. Good morning. Tommy, so bullish on Bitcoin. It works. Chevy, what's up, my man? Hello to the Bitcoin Breakup waiting room. Good morning, peace profiteers. That's what we're talking about today, guys. Jeremy, you're on top of it. We're talking about profits of peace, right? We're talking about peace profiters. You have the theme locked down. King Mansa Musa, what's up, my man? Greetings from Florida, where Bitcoin is the sunshine of our financial sovereignty. Beautiful, beautiful. Good morning from pull-ups in Moscow time, Tommy D. And we got Daniel coming in to us from the great Green Mountain State, where I am also broadcasting from. Less of a Green Mountain State right now. It's looking pretty autumnal. We got the orange and the red mountains today, so they're coming in. It couldn't be prettier here. We're having the best weather these days. We're just loving it. We're loving it. So let me just acknowledge that the best weather is indeed coming from here, and it is indeed the sunshine that is just making all those leaves look orange and red and bright, and it's making the whole chain of green mountains look as beautiful as they can look. And Bitcoin is also running. So all that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what is new. So, as you know, we like to get started every morning with a little Moscow time. Even nature loves orange, indeed. Yeah, we got the orange. We got the orange leaves everywhere, red, orange, having a good time. So today's Moscow time, I've said it a few times. Sometimes they're special, right? Sometimes they're great and amazing. Today, basically, the way I look at it is everything you need to know about what's happening on planet Earth is in Moscow time. Like every story that's important, every single thing you need to know is in today's Moscow time. One second. All right. So what do we got? First up, we're gonna. I put them in an order too to tell you the whole story. Okay, the whole story is in the order. The entire story is in the order. So first up, we've got Mehdi Hassan, one of our favorite fake news purveyors. Right? He's got that special ability to be annoying when he's lying. Right? Not all of them are annoying when they lie. Some of them are just good at lying. Right? He's got the special quality that he's really annoying when he lies. And here's what he tweeted yesterday. I just got my COVID and flu shots. Done. Do yourself a favor. Don't listen to the grifters, contrarians, conspiracy theorists, and nut jobs on here. Get yourself boosted and protect yourselves and your families. Don't be this guy. And he's talking about the guy a couple of years ago, I guess. You know, remember when they were running all those headlines that if you didn't get a vaccine, like everyone around you died, and if ever it happened, they just ran those stories, right? So this is a 2021 story that Mehdi Hassan tweeted around yesterday. Father of 5 wishes he'd gotten damn vaccine just before dying from COVID-19, right? So that's what's going on there. Mehdi, thank you. I don't know if you guys noticed, but it was the football game the other night. I think it was 2 nights ago, Sunday night maybe. And what happened was there was a player for the Kansas City Chiefs. I guess he's kind of famous. I don't really watch too much sports ball stuff, right? I used to be a big fan of. One second, geez, Louise. Kids are running amok this morning. So there was a football game of the night, and the whole internet went abuzz. All of America is still talking about it. there was a football player who showed up and he brought his girlfriend. Who was his girlfriend? Nobody knew this before, but it's Taylor Swift, I guess the most famous person in the world. She sings some songs and blah, blah, blah. So she's up in the stands. Of course, they make a big deal about it, right? Taylor Swift, the Swifties, everyone's still fighting about it on Twitter. But what did we notice about this football player who I've never really heard? I'm not, so by the way, again, not an NFL fan. Don't even really watch the Super Bowl, right? Like maybe I kind of know which teams are doing well and I know the vibe of the NFL for the year, but that's about it. So this guy, I never really heard of him before, but he's a tight end. Tight ends are typically athletic and big and all those kinds of things, right? So just a coincidence, okay, guys, this is just a coincidence. So the football player shows up at the game and he brings Taylor Swift, but he got a new job this weekend. The football player also got a new job. He is now the Pfizer spokesperson for the vaccine. It's just it's just normal stuff. You get the vaccine contract, and then you also get the most famous girlfriend in America who shows up at your game and cheers you on and sits with your parents and all that. So indeed, the NFL tight end Travis, I guess his name is Kelce, I don't know, is Pfizer's latest poster boy for the new COVID booster, right? So there you go. The COVID booster guy is also just coincidentally dating Taylor Swift. No big deal, right? It's no big deal. So and she's the one that the economists are giving all the credit for the financial boost in America, right? She's like the biggest financial boost going, apparently. Her concerts bring like GDP measurability. Apparently her concert in Vancouver was such a big deal that the news let me know that it caused a measurement on the Richter scale, so the earthquake scale. That's the kind of stories they're running about her these days. All right, this one's good too, right? Trudeau, when pressed about all of this stuff with the Nazi, that he saluted and congratulated on his fine work in the Canadian Parliament. So his response, right? So he had to give an answer. So his answer is, now remember, he's being questioned about the Nazi that he saluted, right? His answer is, I think it's going to be really important that all of us push back against Russian propaganda, is what he says. Russian disinformation. What's this excuse? We're going to talk about that more later. That makes a return in our main story today. So in our theme. Of course it does. This one's good. We talked about it a bit yesterday, but there's more headlines about it. This is Newsweek from yesterday. U.S. will pay salaries of thousands of Ukrainians during the government shutdown. So even if the United States has a government shutdown, no big worry. No big worry. If Matt Gaetz and all these guys get their single spending bills and they use the power of the purse to push the executive and push the American government into not spending money, that won't matter. It looks like Ukraine is going to be walled off. So, if you want to make sure that everyone in Ukraine has a job and is going to their job, don't worry. We got it covered. This is from Bloomberg. Right now, they're telling us that COVID is back. Here's what you need to know. With colder weather in the U.S., COVID is coming. Bloomberg, thank you. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Right? Here's where things start to get this is where Moscow time is really coming together today to tell you the whole world, everything you need to know is in Moscow time today. So the first up, so everything we said is important too, right? That all leads into this. But here we go. This is from Reuters, one of our favorite fake news outlets. And they say that the elusive Fed soft landing nears. But why are so many Americans mad about the economy? Why are they mad? Well, I mean, come on. What are they mad about, right? Why are they mad? They have no reason to be mad. Now, speaking of people who are mad, all right, this is from The Economist. The Economist just really doing God's work here. And they're really worried with this headline about Larry Fink. They're going out of their way because they're a little upset that Larry Fink is getting mistreated. So the headline is The Demonization of BlackRock's Larry Fink. And then here's the tweet that goes along with it. All he wanted to do was save the planet and make his firm a fortune, guys. That's it. He had one goal. He just had one goal. Why does the chairman of the world's largest asset management firm have so many enemies? Why are people mad about the economy? Why does this guy have so many enemies? Why? It's too bad. And here's the best one. This is from The Economist as well, right? This is from The Economist as well. So Jamie Dimon, the chairman of JP Morgan, all right, goes into The Economist. They're already worried about what Larry Fink is up against, right? He's got, you think Russell Brand has trouble, right? No, Larry Fink, he's got all the trouble, right? But what did Jamie Dimon have to say about the whole affair, right? So he's there, and he's giving a public policy interview, and he comes out and says, "I would worry about another Trump presidency." He's worried about another Trump presidency. Okay, so Larry Fink, Jamie Dimon, after 4 years of knowing exactly what Trump does, right? We actually have a track record of Trump now, 4 years, right? But he's worried now, right? He's worried now about what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, right? He's just worried. He's just worried, right? So Jamie Dimon worried about Trump. And Larry Fink, poor guy. Why? He just wanted to save the world, guys. He just wanted to help people. And the poor people, they wouldn't let him do what he wanted to do, right? They called him names, and they said everything that he was saying about ESG was not nice, and he didn't like that, right? So he's not even going to talk about ESG anymore. That's what he said. I'm not even going to talk about it. It became politicized. I don't like it anymore, right? So that's what we got with Larry Fink. So imagine you get The Economist, you get all of this fake news out there trying to tell you that the vaccine is good, and Taylor Swift also likes it in Monday Night Football. You get the news saying we might have a shutdown in our economy, but don't worry, it won't affect the money we're going to pay to Ukraine, right? And what are people even worried about the economy for? Come on, guys, like, things are great. They're great. They're amazing, right? And the only thing that's really the problem is that people are mean and nasty to Larry Fink, right? And then Jamie Dimon reminds us all that the real looming problem is another term of Trump that could happen. It would be just the worst, right? So I think everything you need to know about planet Earth and what's wrong is in today's Moscow Time headlines, right? And what we've learned from the Russia stuff, and what we've learned from Mike Benz, who we're going to talk about, all of that, I think, combines to, I think, never before have Bitcoin and fiat as juxtaposed, as contrasting as they are today on this day. And we'll get into it, right? So let's first talk a bit about Trudeau again, right? So Matt Taibbi wrote an article about it all, and it's on Substack if you want to see it. And he says Justin Trudeau's So, by the way, the Canadians are never going to hold his feet to the fire on this, right? It's just going to be washed away. I don't imagine it's going to take many days for them to forget about it, right? They're going to try and ride it for like a day or two and see if the outrage is still there. I don't think it's going to stick. I think it's just, stupid speaker. He'll probably get fired, and that'll probably be the end of it. But I don't know. You never know, right? These things can go viral. So that's what we're talking about today, the virality of things you hear, things you see, stories, narrative virality is a big part of it, which is what we're going to talk about with Mike Benz today, which is something he wrote about recently. So here's the Matt Taibbi thing. Justin Trudeau's Nazi hot take flexibility. Warning of Russian disinformation after a clear political own goal. Canada's Prime Minister solidifies his status as the world's most nauseating pseudo-intellectual. Indeed, right? And he goes into the whole story, right? A lot of us have heard it before. A year and a half ago, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau denounced a Jewish member of parliament named Melissa Lantsman for standing with people who wave swastikas. So this was, of course, the trucker protests. Lantsman had criticized Trudeau for fanning the flames of an unjustified national emergency in response to the Freedom Convoy trucker protests. The swastikas Trudeau referenced were, even as Snopes conceded, virtually all pictured on signs as a way of mocking and protesting government restrictions. And they show the pictures of the Nazi signs, and basically all of them were, they had a Nazi sign with a F Trudeau sign attached to it next to a "Don't Tread on Me" flag, right? And then he goes in, and here's his recap of it, right? This is the last little bit from Taibbi. Says, Trudeau, in a clear act of official disinformation, smeared thousands of Canadian protesters as Nazis last year with context-twisting descriptions of a few decidedly unrepresentative photos. Now, after the Speaker of the House of Commons invited an ex-Nazi to Parliament in a planned political act, that had to be somewhat representative of the thinking of Trudeau's Liberal government, the Prime Minister is complaining about Russian disinformation, as if that were to blame for his optics. As CBC put it, Trudeau warned that this very event that this event may fuel Russian propaganda. Russian President Vladimir Putin has claimed the Ukraine conflict is about rooting out Nazis. Dude, Vladimir Putin didn't invite a Nazi to parliament. Your government did. Dude, Davos-keteers, right? Davos-keteers. That's what he called them. People who go to Davos, the WEF people, Davos-keteers like Trudeau, have anything inside like shame or their own thoughts? Or are they just manicured readers of talking points? Sheesh, it's almost funny how repugnant these people are, he says, right? Glenn Greenwald jumps into it too and goes into a little bit about how the news and Trudeau are navigating this stuff. And he goes, how, after a lifetime of appearing in blackface, does Justin Trudeau get caught applauding an SS soldier who fought with the Nazis and then instantly starts babbling about Russian disinformation? Do you see the Western elites are use Russia to blame for all their feelings? And he goes into how this actually happened, right? There's many stories of this looking the other way. And even yesterday he brings up, and this is something we all got to talk about, right? Fox News, Trey Gowdy, who they present as a conservative, they present as a Republican, right? There with the Fox reporter, Jen Griffin, who is another one of these national correspondents, another one of these disinformation people, right? And they go right there and they even Trey Gowdy, who used to be a congressman for South Carolina, who sometimes hosts stuff on Fox News, expresses shock and outrage that anyone might question Biden's war in Ukraine. And this woman, Jen Griffin, who's with him, says those who criticize Biden's policies are victims of Russian disinformation, right? So that's the same story. And that was just yesterday. That's Glenn Greenwald bringing that up yesterday and tying it in. He also did a resume of all the times they've tried to hide in the newspapers or explain away the Nazi affiliations of the Ukrainian army, right? So here he brings up a story that he published back in June. It's worth taking a minute to recall the impressive newfound commitment of Western media, which sees fascism in every MAGA hat, to downplaying Nazism in Ukraine. And he brings up the actual articles of where they explain away the Nazi icons in the New York Times. The iconography of these groups, including a skull and crossbones patch worn by concentration camp guards and a symbol known as the Black Sun, now appears with some regularity on the uniforms of soldiers fighting on the front line, including soldiers who say the imagery symbolizes Ukrainian sovereignty and pride, not Nazism, right? In the short term, that threatens to reinforce Mr. Putin's propaganda and giving fuel to his false claims that Ukraine must be denazified, a position that ignores the fact that Ukraine's president, Zelensky, is Jewish. What worries me in the Ukrainian context is that the people in Ukraine who are in leadership positions, either they don't know or are not willing to acknowledge and understand how these symbols are viewed outside of Ukraine, right? This is according to Michael Colborn, a researcher with Bellingcat, all right? We've heard of them before. So far, the imagery has not eroded international support of the war. It has, however, left diplomats and Western journalists and advocacy groups in a difficult position. Oh, it's harder to do the propaganda, right? Calling attention to the iconography risks playing into Russian propaganda, saying nothing allows it to spread. Even Jewish groups and anti-hate organizations have traditionally called out hateful symbols, have stayed largely silent. Privately, some leaders have worried about being seen as embracing Russian propaganda talking points. The specific symbol in the picture was made notorious by a Nazi unit that committed war crimes and guarded concentration camps during World War II. That's the one they're talking about with this Nazi SF guy, SS guy that they applauded. He was one of those ones, right? The patch in the photograph sets the Totenkopf atop a Ukrainian flag with a small number 6 below. That patch is the official merchandise of Death in June, a British neo-folk band the Southern Poverty Law Center has said produces hate speech and exploits themes and images of fascism and Nazism, right? So just going into these icons, Glenn Greenwald also breaks down exactly how this messaging goes around and tries to always either make Russia look bad and Ukraine good, right? So it's always the good and bad stuff. So he says here, almost every opponent of Biden's war policy in Ukraine has been subject to deranged, coordinated attacks. Ukraine has created official lists of Russian propagandists. Scandals have been unleashed. They've fired history's most watched TV host, removing a key dissenting voice. For the start of the Russian invasion, all new censorship heights have been reached. The EU made it illegal to platform Russian media. Rumble is unavailable in France, with the UK threatening the same. Many declared war on Musk for insufficient censorship. It's an all-out propaganda war. And so he goes into some of these stories, right, about Rumble and Russell Brand. So this might as well be a Moscow time from yesterday, talking about Rumble basically being shut down, right? So this comes from the UK. Set to tumble. I'm an online expert. Russell Brand's refuge platform, Rumble, may be forced offline under new internet safety laws, right? So internet safety laws. Mike Benz has been talking about this a lot, and he's been prescribing or predicting how the system is going to move for censorship, right? So here's what he says, right? He says, I warned about this at the top of my lungs for the past, I don't know how many years. Need a supercut of all my interview segments saying ultimately they will use a rule of law predicate to effectively ban alternative platforms, right? So what that means is more or less they're going to say that places that don't have censorship middleware, that's what he's been talking about for a while, this compliance software that would automatically go out. You're even seeing it in some studies, let's say, right? So there's a study right now in the United States. There was a bunch of money given to it, and it's one of these Department of Defense deals, right? Studying American resistance to AI, right? Why are Americans resistant to AI, especially in the news service? And the only reason you'd have to look into that, the only reason you'd even want to study that is because you want to break down the resistance. Now, the resistance would only come, there wouldn't be any resistance if they had actual AI, which was able to perceive fake news. Now, it wouldn't be difficult for AI to pick up on fake news. I mean, I can do it very quickly, right? If you give it the formula and you make it recognize the patterns, it wouldn't be hard, right? It wouldn't be hard for it to be programmed to weed out fake news, weed out spin. We can just say right now, if you're mind reading, it's fake news, right? Anytime, if it doesn't have the amount of research, if it doesn't fulfill criteria, it would be elementary for AI to be used at an individual level to weed out and filter fake news. So the resistance we would have to AI would only come from it failing, and we would accept it for what it is if it was successful. If it really did protect you from fake news, everyone would jump in 2 feet first. You don't actually need to study it. Now, the reason you need to study it is because that's not what you're going to do. You're going to be providing a separate system, which is more misinformation. And that's what Mike Benz has been saying, right? That's why you'd have to study it. It's obvious people would trust AI if it had a good track record. And all you have to do is unleash it and see if it gets the track record, and people would use it. Like, you don't need to science it up, right? You don't need to get more complicated than what it already is. So from that point of view, that you're even studying AI and people's resistance to it means you're trying to manipulate it, to me anyway, manipulate it so that you can create a not trustworthy AI that would do exactly what the fake news is doing today: spin you, run psyops, manipulate you, do all these things, right? So what he's saying here is that it's going to go into the middleware piece, but it's not just there. I have another theory about where it's headed, right? You can even see this the thing that Trudeau did by running his own talking points about Russian disinformation, blaming it on Russia again, using this twisted logic in order to diffuse attention, and then hoping that the media that he pays for reports it that way and lets it slide, which is what I think is going to happen. But the other tactic you're seeing, and this came from yesterday as well, is so Mike Benz talks a lot about the middleware, compliance as a business, and that's where a lot of the censorship will head. Well, there's one other place, and it's from Hillary Clinton. So it turns out that Hillary, I don't know if you guys heard, Hillary Clinton has announced that she's starting a podcast. She announced it yesterday. Okay, so Hillary Clinton is going to have a new podcast. And her podcast is going to be, let me find the quote on it here. I definitely kept these notes, and if I didn't, I will find it. So Hillary Clinton is going to have a podcast now, and her podcast is going to be, let me find it. Let me find Hillary's. Yeah, here we go. So I'm thrilled to kick off season 4 of my podcast. Oh, it's already season 4. I thought it was new. Oh, You and Me Both, with someone I'm a huge fan of, Democratic House Leader Hakeem Jeffries. From hip hop to civil service and criminal justice reform to Congress, we get deep into what makes this young leader tick and how he envisions the future of the Democrat Party, right? So you get Hillary Clinton there doing it, talking about, all this stuff. And of course, she's been on for days now doing media tours with Jen Psaki and all these people talking about Russia, just as Glenn Greenwald criticized her for doing. And if you imagine, right, that it's been years that she's doing this, right? She's been going on talking about Russia all the time, things that have been completely debunked, right? You get Sarah Carter mentioning it here. Hillary Clinton colluded with Russia and foreign agents, British MI6 spy Christopher Steele, and paid for his fake dossier to target President Trump. She has been behind and in front of one of the most brazen psychological operations, information warfare, in our history. She, along with her minions, Brennan, Clapper, Comey, McCabe, claims the 2016 election was stolen, yet FBI isn't putting her in prison for these wild conspiracy theories. Instead, they work with her, and there is no justice. This is the exact reason the American people have lost faith in the justice system. All right, now think of all this, and then even go back to what's happening with Russell Brand. Right, there's multiple things. Associated Press today, so she gets her own podcast to talk about this stuff. Russell Brand, RNC's live streaming partner for the GOP debate, is a haven for disinformation and extremism. Obviously, again talking about Rumble, right? Glenn Greenwald saying here, not only is corporate media like the Associated Press predictably running hit pieces on Rumble for its crime of not obeying censorship orders of the neoliberal establishment, but British media outlets are explicitly threatening that Rumble will be banned from the UK under its repressive new law. So, all of these things happening, you get more conversation now about Rumble just being taken off the airwaves. This falls right into what Mike Benz has been saying. Mike Benz tweeted this out that he published last year in November. DHS censorship agency had strange first mission, right? So this is the censorship agency that got going just before the 2020 election. And this is what he says happens, right? So remember, Hillary can talk about whatever she wants about the 2016 election, but coming into 2020, the plan changed, and this is what he found, right? Banning speech that casts doubt on red mirage, blue shift election events, right? So they started doing this before. He says, network throttled millions of posts ahead of the 2020 election, blocked emerging narratives from reaching a virality threshold. That's where I got the theme for today, Bitcoin's narrative velocity threshold, because we're going to talk about it in a second. Censors boast on video of getting tech companies to ban entire categories of election speech under threat of huge regulatory pressure. Months before the 2020 election, censors systematically targeted all speech categories that could challenge a future red mirage, blue shift election scenario. So by August of 2020, I was sure the election was going to get scammed and was telling everyone that was going to happen. We were not going to have a clear result because you could already start to see things like this piling on and leading to each other. Now, we're seeing it again as we get into the 2024 election. You're seeing people knocked off the board who would otherwise be really useful. Like Russell Brand is extremely persuasive. That's why a lot of people suspect he's just being taken off the board because he's too good at what he does, right? He has too much of an audience. He's too keyed in on what's happening, and he's too capable of spreading the message and spreading the word. So after all the attention Russell Brand has gotten in the past week because of these allegations, and now he's suddenly probably the most talked about person in the world, he launched his first show back yesterday. All right. So Russell Brand, first show after all of this mess, after the censorship, during the threats, everything's still ongoing. And what was his show about? Right. So he brought on Jimmy Dore, right? Jimmy Dore, the comedian, comes on, who is a very loud anti-war voice, anti-Ukraine war voice, right? Comes in and they talk about, so Russell Brand and Jimmy Dore, both comedians, both talking heads now, come together, talk about censorship, talk about the war, talk about what's going on. And what comes up? What do you think comes up? when two people who are censored, two people who are having trouble getting their minds around the military industrial complex, the profit of war, and all of these things, people who are on top of the story, what do they end up talking about? You guessed it. They talk about Bitcoin, and not just Bitcoin. They talk about RFK. They talk about Trudeau again, right? So remember, Trudeau was the cause of Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s decision to become a Bitcoiner. Like many people, he didn't get Bitcoin until he saw this Nazi thing in Ottawa. He saw the propaganda, he saw the lies, and he saw how attacking the finances of individual protesters was not only cheered on by the mainstream media, it was suggested by the mainstream media, all right? The greatest financial loser in the history of the world, Mark Carney, who used to be the head of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada and the BIS in Switzerland, wrote an op-ed saying, you guys should just do this. Like, just end this protest now. There's Nazis there, he said. There's Nazis there. You have to find the money, follow the money, and get them. All right. So this ended up radicalizing Bobby Kennedy Jr., which he said at our show. So yesterday, Jimmy Dore on the Russell Brand show says specifically, I didn't get Bitcoin until I heard Bobby Kennedy Jr. at a Bitcoin conference, our conference, talking about Bitcoin and the truckers in Ottawa. And he goes, now I get it. He says, I bought Bitcoin that day, right? So imagine Russell Brand with all the attention in the world on him right now, everyone paying attention, right? Everyone looking at what he's saying, everyone trying to cancel him, everyone trying to cut off his money. And what does he find? Finally, he finds Bitcoin, and they start talking about Bitcoin. Jimmy Dore, doesn't try and be a Bitcoin expert. He's like, this is our only chance. I think now I get it. It's our only chance, right? So along those lines, you had yesterday Balaji, right? So Balaji comes out yesterday again. He's been making the point for a long time. Remember, he made the Bit Signal, the $1 million bet on Bitcoin this winter, in order to bring attention to Bitcoin, bring attention to the bank failures, bring attention to the failure of the central planning economists in America, and that they had turned basically America into Argentina, he said. Well, it looks like his predictions were a few months off, but they're coming to light, right? Now, that's why I think you start seeing a lot of these stories about Fink and Jamie Dimon and all these people. So he comes out and says that all of this stuff, obviously fiat, industrial war machine. The reason we have these wars is because you cannot follow the money. There is no feedback loop. It is perpetual money. And he even breaks it down in terms of history, right? He says that in the past, gold was used to limit war, right? That's why World War I is so important. That's why we forget about looking into World War I. But remember, the Federal Reserve starts just before World War I. And World War I is the first war where gold-backed countries who had a limited amount of capacity to fight because they had feedback of finances and had to actually ask the people to support the war, not just print more money. World War I is really the war of fiat versus gold. After that, the world entirely changes, and World War II is set up in a completely different framework. So what he says here is that World War II was the first time in recorded history where the manpower and productive capacity of states were exhausted before the state's finances gave out, right? Because of fiat. It was a war machine. Fiat is the ultimate war machine. And he's saying it right here. So he comes back and says that $8 trillion spent on forever wars. The only way out is to somehow make peace even more profitable, right? Make peace profitable. And indeed, if you have feedback into the system, if you're able to actually figure this out, right, you would have that formula. Now, I think we're starting to see the actual economic case for peace being profitable coming from Microsoft, of all cases. Imagine Microsoft, right? So Microsoft announced this week that they're going to get into the small modular nuclear reactor business. They're going to become one of the biggest buyers of small modular nuclear reactors, and they're actually going to start building them all over the place, which I 100% think is going to change the world, because they're going to prove the actual business model of a private company owning the energy source. And because they have to, they have like data centers and all that stuff, they want to own it, they want to own the energy. But of course, by showing the model, you're going to have Bitcoin miners copy it. And I thought Bitcoin miners would invent it, but because I never thought Microsoft would do this. But now that Microsoft is actually going to go out and buy all these small modular nuclear reactors, they're actually going to create the financial footing for the virus of Bitcoin, the narrative virus of Bitcoin, the narrative velocity threshold to actually penetrate. We're going to see energy and money combine and couple psychologically in people's minds. They're going to understand that a lot better. And again, what I continue to believe is that supporting all of these wars and the shame that will come anyway from being a Trudeau supporter or a Clinton supporter, they're not just going to be able to say they were wrong, right? That's not how we're going to get there. We're not going to get there because a bunch of people are suddenly like, oh shit, everything I thought was wrong because I'm stupid or I got it wrong or whatever, right? Everyone is going to need an excuse to break the cognitive dissonance that's going on societally, right? So in order to do that, in order to break this cognitive dissonance, you need a simple narrative. You need a story to tell that makes it all go away, that makes you on the side. I think everyone wants to be on the good side, right? Nobody wants to be on a bad side. Nobody wants to be with the Nazis. Nobody wants to be, part of an industrial war machine or an industrial censorship machine. Nobody wants that. Nobody. A few tiny amount of people, but it's not enough to make a critical mass, right? It's not enough to hit that threshold. So all this to say, we have all of this confusion and fighting and exactly as Mike Benn said, right, that the whole system was designed to block the narrative threshold velocity. I think of this in terms of like exit velocity, right? I used to say that a lot about Bitcoin. We need to reach exit velocity. I stole that from Peter Thiel, who used to say both him and Elon Musk thought that way when they started PayPal. When they started PayPal, they made the analogy of exit velocity. Not everyone understood what they were trying to build. They were trying to build Bitcoin, you know that, right? So Peter Thiel was trying to build Bitcoin, but he couldn't figure it out. He couldn't figure out how to make a peerless system, a peer-to-peer financial system. So they had to settle with what PayPal was. And it's still a subversive technology for what it is, but he realized he needed to get it to a certain level of success before they understood the Swift people, the Jamie Dimons, and all of these folks, what it could actually do. And they were successful. So their goal was exit velocity. Now, I've said before on the show that I believe Bitcoin reached exit velocity in 2019 when the Facebook Libra thing came out, because at that time they hauled our asses into Congress. Everyone came. It was shitcoiners, Bitcoiners, everybody, right? And the contrast of Bitcoin versus crypto was enough at that one juncture that Bitcoin wasn't Facebook. At once the Facebook thing showed the whole battle plan, right? You could see the whole field. And right away I said, that's the danger. We're showing the whole field right now. It's going to be obvious what Bitcoin can do. You're showing them the whole field. And the way Bitcoin was able to come out of that unscathed, in fact, better. That's where the word shitcoin was popularized. Meltem Demirors said shitcoin on the floor, the Congress testimony, whatever thing. And people laughed and but it became sort of the narrative threshold was pierced, and you had shitcoins and Bitcoin, and it hasn't really changed since then, right? That became a major cleavage point in the industry, in the psychological narratives that we all follow. So from then on, the world was actually different, and I said, I believe we have entered space. I believe we have left the atmosphere of Earth as of the summer of 2019. And I said, I think we're in orbit, and I think the earthly forces of gravity and legal stuff doesn't affect Bitcoin anymore. I think we're beyond it. I think we've reached beyond that because narrative-wise, people understand. And I think all of the stuff that we have with Russell Brand and all that is going to continue to help that. I continue to believe that Trudeau's failures, and I'll never be able to thank Trudeau enough for being such a loser, for being such a failure, because I said it when it happened during the truckers' protests in Canada. I didn't think you could orange pill every Canadian at once, and he did it. He really did it. I don't think he meant to do it, but he obviously didn't mean to do it. He created the conditions for viral narrative threshold ascendance. More people than ever understood Bitcoin in its simplicity. Bitcoin is not a complicated thing. It's not even close to complicated when you boil it down to it can't be censored, and censorship is a problem. It is uncounterfeitable money, which means you have a feedback in how much money we actually have. You can't hide that either. So it's just transparency, right? It's what I've been talking about for a while. It's transparency the other way. I don't think the answer is we get privacy against government and then that's how things go forward. You can't trust them and you can't trust us as normal people. We will sell our privacy for an erection, for you name it, right? Like little, like not even a lot, we'll sell it, right? It's just not a good plan to count on our ability to guard our privacy going forward. It's a bad system because it expects too much of us. The right answer to me is to fight government insight into our own lives and manipulation and psyops, is to reverse the polarity and get transparency the other way. Bitcoin can do that, which is more powerful, I would argue, than just personal privacy. Having transparency in how they operate, where they put their money, having those feedback loops, understanding that Hillary Clinton is a major psyop manufacturer and entirely based on spinning people and lying to them. That's her whole career. There's nothing sincere about her at all, right? The same with Trudeau. How are these people so rich, right? The Clinton Global Initiative, right? Well, it wasn't capable during the Trump years. It's just relaunched now, right? It relaunched because it can get the free money and it can do the grift again. It couldn't do the grift during the Trump years because he wasn't going to give the Clinton Global Initiative money, right? So here we are, and it really is now a race. It really is a race in virality. We have competing viruses. We have COVID, which is, I think the simulation is winking at us here. It is literally competing viruses. COVID is a mind virus. It is a virus that forces you or suggests or nudges you into compliance with the top-down expert pyramid of thought, right? Which is exactly what you want people to think if you're going to run other ops through that system of decision-making. And so it's very exciting to people who see this capacity to brainwash people from the top down like that, to train them in this way and then just, rinse and repeat. That's one virus, right? And people have caught that virus. They've caught the COVID-19 follow the leader virus. There's a lot of those people, right? But the narrative virus that is Bitcoin is going to free people from the guilt of being tricked by these people. It's going to give everyone the excuse they need to say, well, they were able to trick me. They were able to get me to believe in this war and that war, and that these people were Nazis and those people were good and those people weren't. It was able to do that because it had manipulated the money, because the manipulation of money itself was powerful enough to trick me that I can now see it. So the idea that Bitcoin as this mind virus spreading throughout the world, and I've often called it that. I've often called Bitcoin a virus. I learned it in a viral way when we saw everyone this morning saying, I can only think of Bitcoin. That's the virality part of Bitcoin. It is also a mind virus. It is absolutely a mind virus. I have not spent a day of my life since I learned about Bitcoin not thinking about Bitcoin, and it's been over 10 years. I think about it all the time. And it's not just like, oh, Bitcoin, right? It's not that. It's not even close to that. It's looking around at all the broken things and saying, well, Bitcoin fixed that. We can fix this. It'll fix this way. It'll fix that way. Even yesterday, talking about time preference and all of these things, right? The whole racist thing is just because it's narrative virality threshold. You throw it up and try and convince everyone that you can actually talk about individuals by looking at an aggregate of their skin color and think that gives you some degree of information. It doesn't. That is a narrative bias. It's high time preference, trying to understand everything with the most basic amount of facts. It's not treating individuals as individuals. Bitcoin eventually, by slowing everything down, will make it absurd to have ever thought that you should think about someone in terms of their sexual orientation and skin color in order to strip down and minimize the amount of thought you actually have to give them in order to understand where they fit in the world. It's just a loser shortcut book to understanding how to understand the world, right? In the end, you have to be able to treat everyone as an individual, and that requires you to lower your time preference, take the time to talk to people, listen to people, understand their problems, put their problems in the forefront of your mind for a split second. It doesn't take a lot, right? I'm not saying we have to make everyone selfless. It's just we have to make, because Bitcoin won't solve that, right? Remember, Satoshi, like Jesus Christ, accepts us for who we are. Selfish motherfucking scammers. All of us, right? And because of that, we don't have to do anything different. Now, if you can actually get into the subconscious of people, which is what Bitcoin ends up doing. It gets into the subconscious and gets you to slow things down so that, if I'm not, my back isn't up against the wall and I'm not being threatened with death, I definitely do have time to listen to someone. And if I can solve their problems, that'll solve problems for me in the long run anyway, right? So that's how you start perpetuating this whole thing. So when I see Russell Brand attacked and the first thing he goes to is Bitcoin, and the first conversation he has after the attack is Bitcoin, referencing our own event, referencing what we saw with Bobby Kennedy Jr., where he referenced what we saw in Canada, continues to prove my point that Justin Trudeau will be the greatest loser in the history of liberal politics. They're probably going to blame him for everything crashing and falling apart because he is the weakest link in the fiat chain, for sure. He's the slowest node. He's the slowest node. And because he's so slow, people see how the machine works, right? It's not fast enough in the way a magic trick works. Hillary Clinton, much better than him, like way better, like one of the greatest ever. Hard to even imagine what a good magician she is. Just another level. Now she has all kinds of help and production quality and that and this and that. But the talent is certainly there. Never forget, Hillary Clinton is one of the smartest people you've ever seen in your life, one of the most talented. It's a shame what happened to her. It really is a shame. I do believe she went out, on to try to make a better world at one point. But she was already lost when she was running. Don't forget her complicit acts within the censorship industrial complex, within the PSYOP operations, goes as far back as Watergate, right? She was part of the Watergate prosecution team, and everybody at the time knew Watergate was simply an extension of the Kennedy assassination. It was a proto-Trump assassination in the way they assassinated Trump's character. That originated with the assassination of Nixon's character because the Kennedy assassination was too sloppy, so they had to come up with a new system. And Nixon is the new system. If you remember Tucker Carlson's famous address about Kennedy assassination started with a story about Nixon, right? When he asked the audience, and this is how I even made the prediction about Bobby Kennedy in the first place, becoming a Bitcoiner and joining our movement last November. And that's when I started reaching out to Bobby Kennedy in order to get him at the Bitcoin show. When they ran the show last November, it started off with, and this is the show that Bobby Kennedy said to Tucker Carlson, that's the bravest journalism that's happened in America in like 40 years when it was done. That's how I included Bobby Kennedy in the story. He wasn't even mentioned in the story, right? When Tucker Carlson ran it. So it started with the story that Tucker ran last November that got the ball rolling for me anyway, that Bobby was going to be a Bitcoiner and that we could draft him and that he would be a big help and all of these things. Way before he announced he was running for president, 3 months before he was announced for president, I was after him as a speaker because of this. So Tucker came out with the show, and it started with the question: do you know who the most famous, popular president in the history of America was? It's Richard Nixon. No president had won by a greater margin than Nixon won in 1972, yet he didn't even make it 3 years. And why is that? And that's how the show started, right? How do you go from being the most popular president in the history of the world, an anti-war, I'm going to end Vietnam, all of that stuff, 1972 election, right? How do you go from that to kicked out of office within 3 years? So he breaks it all down and basically makes the case that I just said, right? That what happened to Bobby Kennedy in 64 or 63 was a little sloppy. They wanted a better approach. They came up with this character assassination scheme, did it to Nixon. It worked brilliantly. It worked, for years. He's been regarded as a criminal, and even though he didn't really do anything, nothing compared to what the people these days are doing. Watergate is absolutely a kindergarten story compared to what Hillary has done. It's nothing. It's literally nothing compared to what we've seen, right? And so they destroyed him, and they used the same method on Trump years later. It was a character assassination, and I continue to believe if it doesn't work, they're going to try and kill Trump, right? We've talked about that many times here. Why not? Like, if it doesn't work, can they actually live with an ascendant Trump? I don't know, right? I don't know. If it does happen, I continue to believe that Kennedy at that point just has to act like he's already won the presidency and say, there's no way, like he doesn't even have to say, now Americans will vote for me. I think he has to say, if they do it to Trump, he's got to say, okay, it's clear I'm going to be the president because someone's got to get back. Everyone will know it's an assassination. Basically, there'll be no hiding that. And he'll have to say, well, right, you got to trust someone to get after the assassins, and you can trust me because they killed my dad and they killed my uncle, and I'll get them now, right? So I think that would make him the only credible candidate for president. I absolutely do not want Donald Trump to be assassinated. Let me get that straight. I love Donald Trump. I do not. I want him to be the person they're cheering for at a football game, not Taylor Swift. And I believe that'll happen. I don't need him to be the president again, but I would love it. I think it would be funny, right? I would love to watch Brains break because he's back. And I've loved that T-shirt. I remember seeing that T-shirt from the summer of 2021 on. I was in Lake George, New York in the summer of 2021, leaving. Was that summer 2021? I think so. Yeah. Anyway, one of these summers I was there in the United States, and I saw everyone had the "I'll be back" Trump Terminator T-shirts already, right? So there you go. It's coming. All right, let me see some of these things. What are people saying? I need to harvest some of my medical herbs after work today. Yeah, sometimes you have to. That it is harvest season for medical herbs, isn't it? Right? We have a lot of medical herb harvesting going on here in Vermont as well. But the medical herbs here in Vermont are extremely expensive. I don't understand how they get away with it. I will be planting a bunch on my farm next year. So we will have more medical herbs on the farm. Kids, I'm navigating grandkids myself. And wow, amazing. They're a lot of work. It's quite a difficulty adjustment. I'm up to the task. Congratulations, Jeremy. Congratulations. I'm late. Big news here in Melbourne. The COVID tyrant. Yeah, I heard about that. I heard about this guy. So, Enmity, pardon me. I don't know much about, I don't pay attention to Australia too much. My wife met an Australian girl this weekend with the kids at the park, and she was shitting on Canadians. She was trying to say that Australia was a better place because they were more conscientious about masks. She was wearing a mask, obviously. Australia was more conscientious. She was saying, all these Canadians, you don't even think about each other without your masks. My wife was like, you are in the right country. Thankfully, we have thought about suicide needles, so go for it. Right? So I can't handle even thinking about Australia enmity. It's too much like Canada, and the people are too dumb. They are saying on Indian News that cocaine was found on his plane, hence the delay. Happy I opted out of mainstream media. Seems like all Moscow Times these days. Bitcoin graffiti, is it ever? That's what I'm saying. I think you have everything you need to know in Moscow Time today to understand how putrid the world of mainstream media has become, right? Remember, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about COVID's back. Oh, Taylor Swift is now dating the Pfizer spokesperson. What a coincidence. What a coincidence. Amazing. Shutdown in America doesn't matter to Ukraine. Why are people mad about the economy? Larry Fink's a nice, swell fella. Why are people so mad at him? And Jamie Dimon, Trump, we can't handle Trump, right? So imagine the richest people want this, and they're trying to tell you what's going on in the world, right? There's no problems, right? Which is why everything Balaji says about Bitcoin being peace and fiat being war is the perfect narrative environment to be in. Remember what Mike Ben said, right? The whole thing about quelling the 2020 election stuff was about the narrative virality threshold. Once it hits exit velocity, they can't stop it. I think Bitcoin is a major blind spot for them. I think the virality of the Bitcoin mine virus cannot be stopped. And once people see the contrast between fiat war, Bitcoin peace, profit in peace, and what we see with Microsoft, what we see with our own capacity, which will be much greater than governments to build nuclear reactors. Just think about it this way. Who do you think can build more nuclear reactors, Microsoft or the state of California? It's not even close. Right? Of course they can. So, the Bitcoiners, I think, fall into that Microsoft capacity. And I think we're going to be fine, and we're going to create all this energy, and we're going to be laughing, right? It's going to be awesome. All right. Hillary Clinton. Studying the resistance. Yeah, there it is. Studying resistance to AI. That's exactly what it sounds like. Vaccine is in the works. Something just can't imagine anybody saying no to. Yeah, this is what I mean. The only reason you'd have to study resistance to AI is if you actually believe that, is if you actually want to put fake AI out there, because it would be elementary for AI to filter fake news. So simple, so simple. And that's not how they want to deploy it. They want to do the middleware thing that Mike Benz is talking about, right? You put it in the middle, AI, that's how they want to use the AI, right? We aggregated news. And they're going to say that makes it fake, right? They're going to come up with their own formula, but it ain't going to work. It ain't going to work. Mike Benz Cyber, Tommy D. Exactly. That's it right there. Mike Benz Cyber. I usually put his handle in my Twitter posts, my X posts, my X tweets. I don't know how to say any of these things anymore. Mockingbird Media, absolutely. Monarchies fear the most, maybe Felipe. But we have a pathetic king. I don't think it would have been as bad, or I think it would have been great had old Elizabeth been younger and been able to handle this stuff. I don't think Elizabeth is turning over the keys to this shithole system. But that's just me. Bitcoin is king. That's what we need. Exactly. It was a great Bitcoin advertisement. Absolutely. Coin gon' pop. Bring Russell to Amsterdam. I've been trying, Daniel. I've been trying like crazy. We want him big time. I tried last year hard too. We'll get him. Max said he tried to explain Bitcoin to Russell Brand 10 years ago, but he didn't get it. No, I know. Yeah, I've heard that many times. Yeah. And remember, Russell tried. I was disappointed in that during the 2020-2021 run. Russell advertised, did one show on Bitcoin and said he's going to dedicate a series to it. And it was only ever the one show. I waited for the series and never saw it, because I've always believed Russell is a really talented communicator and would be great to have on our team, obviously, right? Really enjoying the dialectical process today. Thank you. I'm still learning. We appreciate it. Easier to understand cyber hornets after getting stung, I guess. Yeah, and Bitcoin still comes across to some people as like a computer science project, right? That is a limiting gauge on its narrative virality. You don't have to know that stuff. Now, I get it. It's good to know and blah, blah, blah. I need to know it. Some people need to know it. I think it's kind of for people that we want, who just want to be farmers and save their money. They just need to know it's separation of money and state. I think. I mean, you're free to learn as much as you want, but understanding these incentives is more important, I think, than understanding the rest of it. Didn't the last PayPal CEO become a Bitcoiner as well? No, I think the last CEO, if you're talking about what's his name, the French guy, David Marcus, I don't know if he was the CEO, but most of the PayPal mafia, the ones who started it, like Elon and David Sachs, are Bitcoiners. Oxygen, fuel, spark, escape velocity achieved. Love it. Bitcoin, nuclear, fiat fail. Yeah, that's it. That's escape velocity right there, Robert. I love that. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, really nice. Safe nuclear-powered Bitcoin narrative goes viral, overcoming the social media bias for endless war fiat fuckery system. Destruction to boot. It's coming, veterans. We're almost there. We're really almost there. Dogmatism is what comes to mind. Yeah. Happy to hear you holding out this frame for listening. From my perspective, Bitcoin is incentivizing me to listen for how to disclose the Bitcoin mind virus to new characters. Yeah, everyone's different. I mean, honestly, what did it for me is I knew about Bitcoin. I was already going to study it. I saw a lot of potential, but it was all intellectual. It was only when I met the early Bitcoiners working with Vitalik, frankly, at the Decentral in Toronto. That started in 2014. So I'm already obsessed, right? It's 2013. I've already got the study going. But I'm still thinking in fiat terms, like this will be good for my career. This could be big. You know, I'm still thinking that way. But I met a few of those early Bitcoiners, and the passion, almost religiosity, rubbed off on me right away. They saw something that I could tell there was. You know, when you meet Christians, for example, they have a Christian glow, right? You ever heard of that, right? There's, you know, you'll get it with Muslims too, I guess. I don't. I've spent some time in the Muslim world, but I've seen that there too, right? Really just pleasant, happy people. There's a certain glow, and it often comes with religiosity or something, right? It can come in other ways, so I don't want to make it so exclusive, right? But they all had this sort of super optimism about the future, and I was always optimistic, but that I couldn't unsee that, and somehow just that appreciation of the potential power of the future that it offered on the horizon I never forgot it, and it changed me. It just being around these people. So I'll often describe these people as the ones, and I've said it as a virus at the time, right? That's the virus. And for me, it was the optimists that did it, and so there you go. Greatest loser ever. Love it. Great show today. Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge. Thank you, Nix. Justin is the slowest nose. It's called. How does a footballer go from NFL to spokesperson? Mr. Tomato Head has the answer. So yeah, the what I know, like I'm not a zero in football. I know tight ends are stars because they can catch a long pass or a short pass, and they're generally outsized compared to their defensive cover. So they're often targets to score. So these guys catch balls and can also protect the quarterback. So they're sort of a hybrid position, and because of this hybrid position, they're often in a spot to get a lot of fame and attention. And this guy is one of the best, right? He's got the body type. It's like, you know, 6'8", 300 pounds, and coordinated. It's amazing specimens, right? So he is 100% that. He's just a huge guy with soft hands, and he's coordinated. So not a lot of people that are like that, right? LeBron James, for example, would have been the greatest the world has ever seen at this position had he just decided to do it, right, and not got injured. But he would be like unstoppable at this job. But it's that kind of idea, right? Approaching to the 7 feet tall range and can catch a football on a finger if they need to, right? Those are the best ones. It's an amazing physical. So no doubting that he's not out of nowhere, but there's 5 of him, 10 of him in the league, right? He's not that unique. And so I don't, maybe Taylor Swift does love him. I don't know, right? But I think it's a good advertisement for Pfizer, suddenly. I wonder how much she was paid to go out to that game. Yeah, FJB, FJT. The world has to die before you can accept Bitcoin. Yeah, it's dying pretty quick, man. We're almost there. We're almost there. Digital scarcity is a hard concept for normies to grok. So, Mr. Jeda, I don't think they need to grok that. I don't think they need to grok digital scarcity. I think they need to just grok can't fund war. Easier to understand. Or they don't even have to understand Bitcoin. They have to understand what fiat has done to them, that it's incentivized these things. It's incentivized doublethink and war is peace type, or peace is war type thinking. Let me know when the Sky Drop nominations open up. It's the only way. It's the only. Anyone who's going on about these needles or hanging, no. It's got to be a show. It's got to be an absolute show. when you search Travis, what restaurant did go to? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mikey did bop more. We 5445, I guess, something like that. You're quite winsome in your religiosity as well. Well, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you. We're going for it. All right, team. That's all I got for today. Hope that wasn't too loud. I shall see you all tomorrow. Peace, everyone. Hope you have a great day. The answer was no one cares. No one cares. All right, team. Peace. See you all tomorrow.